through the pages of time, we'll unravel the truth. This big goal's got the knowledge, he'll enlighten the youth.
Hey guys, in this video we're going to discuss the Black Plague and the effects that it had on Europe and the surrounding areas, as well as the causes that brought the plague. So first, to start with, this was a major catastrophe of the Middle Ages. The Black Plague is responsible for killing between 30 and 60% of Europe's population during the mid-1300s when the outbreak started. The primary cause of the Black Plague was bacterium, I'm going to mess it up, Bacterium Yersinia, which is typically transmitted through the bites of insects such as little fleas. It's believed that the fleas came on the backs of rats from east to west, so they probably started in Asia or the Middle East somewhere. And as people began to trade goods between east and west, the fleas leached onto rats, which were holed up in the ships that started in Genoa, and the Genoese traders took these ships across the pretty much the Mediterranean and did a lot of trade. Or it could have become connected to animals on the Silk Road that went from Asia to Europe. So because it's such a long time ago, it's hard to tell exactly which point the plague touched Europe, but it's either from fleas on traders or fleas on boats. It killed around 50 million people. Most of these people were urban, like city people, near places where trade was common. And there were three types of plague that people could have acquired back then. First, you have the Bubonic Plague, which was the most common form. It was a sudden onset of fever, headaches, just a general fatigue and malaise, swelling of the lymph nodes, and then it would cause people to feel immense pain, and you could even turn black or dark blue. It was usually the groin, the armpits, or the neck area that were the most affected by that because they came through the lymph nodes. The second plague is pneumonic plague. This was the one that got inside of people's lungs, and it was contagious through airborne particles. So if you cough, it could easily spread that way, cause chest pains, bloody mucus to come out of the coughing. And then the third plague is probably the most deadly and the worst of all. It was the septicemic plague. And this was where the bacteria entered the bloodstream directly. So through an open wound. It could be transmitted that way, in blood-to-blood contact. And this was the one that caused really high fevers, basically you would bleed from under your skin and have severe abdominal pain. It could become gangrenous, so you might lose some limbs. That was the worst of all, but they all were not good. Societal impact of the Black Plague: it caused widespread economic and religious upheaval. So there was a lot of peasant revolts during this time because leadership couldn't really control the plague. So increase in protest, increase in distrust for government and religious leaders. One of the positives is it led to better wages for the workers and the decline of the feudal system. It changed people's attitudes towards life and death, and it created a new style of art during this time. And here are some examples. It was a more gruesome and grotesque style of art. So when people are in hard situations, sometimes they turn to art, and sometimes cultures develop as a way to cope with those hard situations. So here's some examples. And then the response to the plague. So when a new plague comes, just in general in normal modern society, it can be pretty chaotic. But imagine if we didn't have technology to understand the plague. People back then, they used superstitions and sort of folk remedies to treat the plague. One was leeching, where they would take leeches and put them on the skin of the plague victim so that the leeches would suck the blood out. It turns out that's not a good thing to do when people have plague, because the less blood you have, the harder it is to stay alive. So it was proven to not be a good method. Don't take out people's blood hoping to cure the plague, because then they have the same plague but with just less blood to keep them going. Other remedies that were proven not to work, aromatic herbs were burned. They thought burning herbs in the air would scare away the plague. That also didn't work, so it pays to know, I guess. Another way that they responded, quarantine islands. The island of Pavaglia, south of Italy, was used as a quarantine island where people were sent if they had the plague. And when the people there died of plague, they would put them in a pile and burn their bodies. Sometimes they would even be burned while they were still alive. If they were nearly dead but they were still alive and they were unable to fight back, they would just get burned. So this was almost, think of it like a prison island. Once you were there, you pretty much were going to die there. And they were burned, many of them, so they wouldn't run out of room on the island. Plague doctors treated the plague victims, and they wore these beak-shaped masks. They kind of look like a horror movie or like a Halloween costume. You can see the plague doctor here in the bottom left with those hats, and then they had a robe that was covered in wax, so the plague couldn't get through their robe, supposedly. And they believed that the beak-shaped mask would protect them from bad air. Usually these doctors were second-rate. They weren't like the sharpest ones, because it wasn't a very desirable job to be plague doctor. Cities and towns would hire them to treat the plague patients. And it did lead to modern PPE, personal protective equipment. So this was one of the first instances of people putting glass over their eyes to protect from viruses, and wearing masks and medical robes. So there's some advances that came from it. More advances that came, they associated the plague with filthy living conditions, and society in Europe began to clean up. They focused on sanitation after the plague, and how to treat waste and get debris out of the streets, so that way fleas and rats and pests wouldn't congregate where all the people lived. Also, some cities passed laws that would control how diseases were handled, and they banned the import of certain goods. They also restricted the movement of people, and had food inspections at markets, so markets wouldn't sell contaminated food or have food with fleas. So those are some of the positives. Restricting movements and restricting imports might not be a positive to some, but during a plague, I guess it helps stop the spread. Also, the Black Plague sparked greater awareness for public health issues among governments, and it led to public health departments and public health officials that focus on keeping people safe. So that's the legacy of the plague. I hope this video was informative to you guys, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.
Step into the time machine. Let's travel through the past.